Hello and welcome to Nashville Savvy. I'm your host, Megan Lee Podsiedlik. We talk all things local Nashville metro area politics, culture, and all other things as well. But today we're going to be talking about participatory budgeting. So recently, it's not recent. This isn't a recent idea. Participatory budgeting has been done quite a few times in Metro. We've done it before in a smaller sense, smaller communities, voting on as a community what to spend money towards. But recently, we are undergoing a process of voting on how to spend $10 million in American Rescue Plan funding to help revamp things across Davidson County. So I'm going to let you know voting is open. If you didn't know that voting is open, now you know voting is open. To be honest with you, I didn't know voting was open, and I've been following along suspiciously, not really suspiciously, but unfortunately, there isn't a lot of PR campaigns going on. There was a process where there was a representative from each district that could volunteer to come forward and kind of work on this, become part of the process, and help get the word out. But it has started as of October 1st. It'll be going on until November 30th, and it's an online process. You can also go to the public libraries and log on and do it there. But basically, there's a 35-item ballot. On that ballot includes different improvements for different places. One from each district, which is why there are 35, because there are 35 districts. And those were whittled down from a very large pool, about 1,000 suggestions that were made from Davidson County residents. And these residents could be anyone 14 years and older. So everybody who suggested changes could be, it could be a school project that you suggest some changes, submit them up until, if you're still a resident here in Davidson County, you could have made a suggestion. They whittled it down. Of course, that process was done not only by the steering committee, which is the committee that was overseeing this whole process, that was appointed and volunteered for, the volunteer positions also had input. But the ARP money has very specific regulations of how it can be spent. So there's a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a lot of specific parameters for helping at-risk communities. So that was all in there when it comes to how they decided how to whittle this ballot down to 35 items. And you get to go online, pick 5 of those items, and submit your ballot. But the interesting thing about this process being participatory, there are a few things that we were running into that raised some eyebrows, because this was a countywide initiative and not just a small community coming together to vote on something that they want to do for their small community. So the first thing that popped up, of course, was, well, if there's $10 million that can be spent and you can submit ideas, are we going to see a lot of these nonprofits and other organizations try to put forward initiatives so that they could get this money? And then the second question was, if people who are 14 years and older can participate, how does this voting process, how are we going to regulate this voting process? Because 14-year-olds aren't walking around with identification. So how are we going to make sure that this voting process is sound? And then thirdly, another question came up, and actually I'm going to play a clip of a video first, and then we'll talk about it, because this is a question that I don't think anybody was even thinking about, but it came up during one of the budgeting or the meetings amongst the steering committee. And it was something said by the steering committee chair. His name is Jason Sparks. We're going to play that clip right now.
Available to people that aren't citizens, that just live in our community. So we're trying to keep this as accessible as possible. The only way that something would get tossed is if it didn't have their name and address on it, or if they duplicated the name and address, and we'd have an opportunity to cure that.
I think that we missed the first part of that. Can we start that again?
Because we also want to make this available to people that aren't citizens, that just...
We're going to stop it there. So specifically, we're going to make sure that this is available to people that aren't citizens. That was something that was said during one of the steering committee meetings. And I don't think that anybody was really thinking, oh, we're going to let illegal immigrants vote for where these tax dollars go in Davidson County. But that is something specifically that was brought up during the committee meeting and something that they wanted to target. They wanted to invite non-citizens into the voting process. So not only 14-year-olds and older, but non-citizens. And you also heard in that clip that the actual way that they're scanning or making sure that the votes are valid, the only way they're going to toss them out is if there's not a name with an address. So who's to say? It's just a very, for all the good, I guess like the good intentions behind it, it's very questionable. And I know that people, when this type of stuff pops up, especially when it comes to voting for where tax dollars are being spent, people start scratching their heads. Are they trying to open a door to something else here? And that's definitely, especially since the last few elections and voter integrity has been a big issue. People are weary of these types of initiatives opening the door to online voting. Of course, I went through the process to see how the voting went. Once you see the 35 items on the ballot, you read through them, and then you get to pick up to 5 that you like, because they're going to be able to do, depending on how much each of these things cost, they have $10 million to spend. So they're going to take your top 5 choices. And then when you submit, it's going to ask you for a name, an email, your address, and then you just submit it in, and your phone number, and then you just submit it in. And I'm not really even sure. There's no real clarity on how they're going to double check that you actually live at that address. I know that they talked a little bit about the homeless residents of Davidson County, if they wanted to vote. Sometimes those homeless residents don't necessarily have an address, so they all share addresses or share an address when they enter an address. And so how would you double check that? There's no way of knowing. So participatory budgeting, open to all over 14, including illegal immigrants. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't care about people who are living here who are undocumented. They're here. We do care that they are undocumented. Of course, when we talk about illegal immigration status, it doesn't slap anybody quite as hard in the face as it does for those people who have come over here, gone through the process, and became actual citizens of America. So it's a contentious topic, and it was interesting that they so boldly came out and quite honestly, here, let me fix the audio. There we go. Quite honestly, they came out pretty boldly stating, no, we actually absolutely want to target and open this up to non-citizens. And of course, that'll be controversial going forward. And another part of this that has been put into question, or at least has become questionable, is that it's unknown. It's called participatory, but I've talked to several people, several residents of Nashville and around the area that didn't know, but that's not the most concerning thing. I called around to some of the freshman council members. The freshman council members who are representing you, even though they might not have voted on it because they weren't in council at the time, they're unaware that this is even going on. So they don't even know to share it with their constituents. Of course, there's not a lot in the budget for them to promote this, but man, for participatory budgeting, right now it's low in participation, I would suspect, because I doubt many people know that it's going on. So yep, that's going on until November 30th. So if you want to put your 2 cents into where this stuff should go, I will say that a lot of the items on the ballot are traffic calming. There's quite a few like updates and upgrades in parks and playgrounds and stuff like that, which of course nobody hates wanting to update or upgrade a park or anything like that. So I don't want to put that out there that you could be skeptical of the process while still being like, okay, these are fine initiatives. These are great. We love good initiatives that help neighborhoods, but is this really the process? Is this really the democratic process? Is this fair? And that's okay to question that and keep those 2 issues separate. The last thing that we're going to talk about before we go into our local corner is I wanted to specifically touch on the silence, the cacophonous silence of some leaders in not only Davidson County, but in Williamson County, because it's an interesting juxtaposition that we're seeing. At least you could draw parallels between the two counties right now. We have contentious things happening in Williamson County. We don't really cover that here, but there is a very controversial mayoral election going on. We have Gabrielle Hansen has been under fire. Phil Williams over at News Channel 5 has been all over that campaign. There's a lot of contradictions in that campaign. And then the latest news, of course, is that white supremacists, neo-Nazis showed up to the last forum, the forum that was on October 2nd, in support of Hansen. And now she has refused to outright denounce neo-Nazis or denounce the group. And this has caused a stir, and many Republicans who feel like they're getting browbeaten by this coverage and feel like they're being pigeonholed. They're upset that their leaders are not coming out strong and making a strong statement about what's going on over there in Williamson County. Likewise, there has been some questions amongst us about the silence going on in Davidson County, renouncing Hamas and coming out in support of Israel, and why people have been silent in the council and why the mayor has been silent. The mayor has since come out in support, prayers for Israel, support Israel. He has not come out with he has not strongly denounced Hamas. And we know that the makeup within the council and the makeup within a lot of the coalitions here in Nashville, Tennessee, he might rub up against, people are playing it safe by saying nothing because they don't want to upset anybody. But it has drawn a lot of question from constituents of, is this silence complicit? And I think that's fair to ask. Of course, this is an international news issue, but it affects all of us. We had a huge prayer vigil for the Jewish community at the Jewish Community Center on Monday. 700 plus people showed up. The governor came and spoke. There are clearly people, the Jewish community and people with connections to people who are over in Israel experiencing this right now are deeply affected by this turmoil and by this terrorism that's happened over the last week. So that begs the question, is silence complicit to the actions that are being served? So we have both of those things going on next door, right? The counties right next door to each other, Williamson County with the neo-Nazis, and then the silence coming from leaders here in Davidson County. So I just wanted to touch on that because I think that it should be said out loud. Oop, let me fix this audio again. So we're going to go right into local corner now and talk about lighter things in life. What we're going to talk about today is the Jack Daniel's World Champion Invitational Barbecue in Lynchburg. So this is like a barbecue off that's going on this weekend. And the wonderful thing about this is that it brings people from around the world to Lynchburg, Tennessee, a state that is apparently very discriminatory, but people from around the world come to Lynchburg, Tennessee to basically compete to see who has the best barbecue. And I just love this concept. A friend of mine is a judge at this barbecue off that goes on. And I just like the fact that in a state like Tennessee, we can bring people together. The ambiance there is always so welcoming, cordial, and there's nothing like food that brings a community, even a world community, together. So I love that. I love that we do that here in Tennessee. I love that they do that over at the Jack. And so if you could make it out, or maybe next year put it on your calendar, you want to go see some men in kilts barbecuing, like that's the place to go. Is this championship, Jack Daniel's World Championship barbecue off. So the last thing we're going to touch on today is a little bit of Metro Mayhem. Of course, it's easy to do Metro Mayhem. This week we have our lovely District Attorney Glenn Funk. We're going to pull up his clip right now.
Shootings now than we've ever had. more shootings now than we've ever had. I think in part because of the proliferation of weapons and the fact that we've made it easier and easier to obtain firearms. What used to be a fist fight a long time ago too often becomes a shooting. I was just talking to some officers from the Madison precinct, and they were telling me about a road rage incident that somebody pulled a gun out and started trying to shoot the tires out of another car as they're driving down Old Hickory Boulevard. Well, we're lucky none of those bullets ricocheted off the pavement and hurt anybody. So shootings are up.
All right. So this was a Pod Bless Nashville podcast that they do now locally. It's definitely, they have quite a few people who come on there, and it's run by some prominent people here in town, and it's a great place to go catch up on some local news. But that again was Glenn Funk. He is our district attorney, and there's a couple things in that clip that are this is an old, worn out talking point, of course, that increasing gun ownership increases violence, and of course there's a couple things to point out. For one, in Tennessee, you don't have to register your gun. So we actually know exactly how many people have registered firearms. So he couldn't possibly know if that would be true for Davidson County if we had less gun ownership, that gun violence would actually go down. But also, he says in that clip that we're solving issues with, like, that used to be like a fist fight with guns. And this brings me to another question. It's something that I think that we should talk about, because they love to bring it back to guns. Of course, if you wanted to make an actual correlation based off of statistics, you could correlate the increase of stolen guns by people doing things illegally and stealing guns to the increase of gun violence, if you're going to look at numbers in Nashville, Tennessee, if you're going to use numbers. But even just on a broader level, there were guns throughout history, and acting like that it was all fistfights because people didn't have guns is a silly claim, because the truth is we should really talk about the mental health of people, the short fuses. Hold on. Sorry, what happens with my audio. The mental health, the short fuses, and the boldness of people who feel like they can do this type of react in this violent way because there are no repercussions. Those are the things that we could be talking about, but instead they keep hammering home this, restrictive gun laws and other things that they politicize and use every single opportunity to do so. So that was a Metro Mayhem for this week. Glenn Funk, using the old trope of more guns means more violence. And I'm not even going to go through all the studies that would completely denounce that claim. So there you go. This is Nashville Savvy. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, join us over at the newsletter. We have, on YouTube, we have 3 different podcasts that we do a week, but we also have a daily newsletter at pamphleteer.co. It is free, and you should subscribe. So thanks again, guys. Have a great rest of your day.